Hello and welcome to Reason News. Just yesterday, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security confirmed the deportation of 5 foreign nationals from countries including Vietnam, Jamaica, Cuba, Yemen, and Laos to Eswatini. According to Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, these individuals were, quote, uniquely barbaric, unquote, convicted of violent crimes like murder and child rape, and had been terrorizing American communities. She even claimed their own home countries refused to take them back. This is not the first time the US has engaged in such third country deportations. We saw a similar move earlier this month with 8 men sent to South Sudan. But the choice of Eswatini and the language used to describe these individuals has truly ignited a firestorm. So let's break down the why and the how of this. Why Eswatini? And how can the US legally send individuals to a country they have no direct ties to? Well, this policy and expansion of a previously more secretive Trump administration program allows for deportations to third countries when an individual's home country won't accept them. The legal basis hinges on whether the US receives assurances from the third country that the deportees won't be tortured or persecuted. If those assurances aren't credible, the deportee is supposed to be notified and given a brief window, as little as 6 hours, to raise concerns about persecution or torture. But here's the catch. The standard for proving such a fear is incredibly high. As lawyer Trina Realmuto from the National Immigration Litigation Alliance pointed out, it's an, quote, impossible standard to meet, especially if the person is not knowledgeable about the country. And this brings us to Eswatini itself. Previously known as Swaziland, it's a small landlocked nation in southern Africa, and it's one of the world's last remaining absolute monarchies. King Mswati III has ruled by decree since 1986, and political parties are effectively banned. Human rights groups, including Amnesty International USA, have consistently raised alarms about Eswatini's human rights record. The U.S. State Department's own 2023 Human Rights Report details credible accounts of unlawful killings by security forces, impunity for abusers, and harsh prison conditions. In 2021, pro-democracy protests were met with alleged state violence, resulting in dozens of deaths. So when the US deports individuals, no matter their alleged crimes, to a country with such a human rights backdrop, it immediately raises serious questions. The Eswatini government, for its part, have confirmed receiving the 5 individuals. Acting government spokesperson Tabile Mdluli stated that the deportees are being held in, quote, isolated units where similar offenders are kept, unquote, within correctional facilities. She assured the public that the men pose no threat to the country and emphasized Eswatini's commitment to international agreements and human rights. Mdluli also stated that the two governments would collaborate with the International Organization for Migration, IOM, to facilitate the transit of these inmates to their countries of origin. This implies Eswatini might be acting as a transit hub rather than a final destination. Here's a video from the Associated Press.
The United States says it has sent 5 immigrants to the small African nation of Eswatini in an expansion of the Trump administration's third country deportation program. The U.S. has already deported 8 men to another African country, South Sudan, after the Supreme Court lifted restrictions on sending people to countries where they have no ties. In a post on X, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said the 5 men sent to Eswatini were citizens of Vietnam, Jamaica, Cuba, Yemen, and Laos. She also said they were all convicted criminals and, quote, individuals so uniquely barbaric that their home countries refused to take them back. It's not clear if the men had been deported from prison or if they were detained in immigration operations. The Eswatini government has long been accused of clamping down on human rights.
We strongly condemn this action by the bully USA. We are a very small country in this world. We do not have enough funds to possibly finance this adventure unless there has been exchange of money, which we strongly condemn.
Firstly, the government has to come open of why has it reached this decision. It must correct this decision because it is clear that the people are not in agreement. They do not agree to what the government has done.
There was no immediate comment from Eswatini authorities over any deal to accept third country deportees or what would happen to the men in their country.
But the swiftness and secrecy surrounding these deportations are precisely what concerns human rights advocates. They argue that these individuals are being denied due process with little to no opportunity to challenge their removal. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a scathing dissent regarding a similar deportation to South Sudan, stated that the government feels itself unconstrained by law, free to deport anyone anywhere without notice or an opportunity to be heard. This sentiment resonates strongly with the Eswatini deportations, where the lack of transparency is a major sticking point. What was the exchange to get Eswatini to accept these individuals? Were they diplomatic assurances? And if so, what were they? These are questions that remain unanswered, fueling suspicions that these are less about justice and more about sending a message. The why behind Eswatini's acceptance is also under scrutiny. Analysts suggest that some African nations might be willing to take third country deportees in return for more favorable terms from the US in negotiations over tariffs, foreign aid, investment, and travel visa restrictions. In a transactional relationship where human lives, even those of convicted criminals, could become bargaining chips on the international stage, this raises uncomfortable questions about the ethics of such agreements and whether they truly uphold the principles of justice and human dignity. The immediate future for these 5 men is uncertain. While Eswatini claims they are in isolation and will be facilitated to their home countries with IOM's help, the reality on the ground in a country with a challenging human rights landscape is a cause for concern. Will they face further legal action? What are the conditions of their detention? And most importantly, will their fundamental human rights be respected? These are not trivial questions, particularly when the US Department of Homeland Security has labeled them as, quote, uniquely barbaric, unquote. The perception of their crimes, while undoubtedly severe, should not negate their right to humane treatment and due process under international law. This whole saga forces us to confront a difficult truth. The complexities of international law, national sovereignty, and individual rights are often at odds. When nations refuse to take back their own citizens and the deporting country insists on removal, what happens to those individuals who fall into this legal limbo? Is sending them to a third country the most ethical or even effective solution? This case of the barbaric deportees to Eswatini is a stark reminder that in the pursuit of what one nation deems public safety, the fundamental rights of individuals, even those accused of heinous crimes, must not be overlooked. The conversation around immigration, crime, and human rights is never simple, but it's one we must continue to have with transparency and a critical eye. Until next time, stay informed, updated, and curious.